Chilling tales for dark nights.
Incident on Maple Avenue. Written by Matt Dymerski. Performed by John Evans. Featuring Barry Bowman, Eden, Jesse Cornett, Matteo Goicoechea, Benjamin Lissman, and Ashley Tolfo. I was sitting in my room fiddling with my phone when the ambulance went screaming past my window and crashed into a utility pole down the street with a wall-shaking crunch. After a dumbfounded moment of shock, I leapt up and nearly tripped over the backpack I'd left on the floor. The instant I'd gotten home, I'd sat down and begun browsing random things online, and so had never actually taken off my shoes or settled in. That gave me an advantage now. Fully clothed, jacket and shoes already on, I slammed open my door and ran out into the night. Just as I moved through my short yard, a bright flash starkly lit the avenue, and the 4 small houses across the street briefly burned themselves green in my vision. The disorientation didn't last long, but it was enough to give something the opportunity to burst into flames near the ambulance before I could tell what it was. Full of apprehension, half-blinded, and not sure what to do, I jogged rather than ran closer. A hand on my shoulder stopped me. A sharp-eyed older man peered around at the wreck, his glasses reflecting glimmering light blue.
Careful, those flames are extremely hot.
Smoke began to roil through the neighborhood as the light blue fire oozed in a growing pool in front of the ambulance. What's burning? Studying it from a distance, he shook his head.
It looks like something flew through the front windshield during the crash and ruptured on the pavement. Napalmish consistency. Very hot. Could be a dangerous chemical.
As the rest of the neighborhood began tentatively joining us on the street, I looked him over. You an expert on this sort of thing?
Academic only, but yes. I'm Grady, Professor Grady.
I'm Evan. I think I've seen your name on the class list.
Possibly, yes.
He turned and raised his arms to gather our neighbors.
Everyone, please be very careful to avoid that fire. It could be dangerous. Don't inhale the smoke if it comes your way. Can someone call emergency services?
Cast in light blue, the 7 approaching faces were as eerie as they were fearful. And I recognized 2 of them. There was that blonde girl who went for a run every morning around the time I usually left for campus. And behind her was a Japanese-American student I'd seen in 2 of my classes. He came forward and spoke to me first while the others got out their phones.
I've seen you around. I'm O'Hara.
Evan.
How is the driver?
Nobody's checked on him yet.
What, are we just going to stand here staring? Let's go!
Be careful. We'll shout if that burning liquid gets near the ambulance.
Together, we crept closer to the growing wall of pale blue fire as it seeped across the street like a closing curtain. The professor had been right. From here, I could see something had broken open upon the pavement ahead. Whatever the container had been, it had begun to melt now, and it hurt to look in the direction of the searing flames. Sliding along the side of the ambulance to partially shield ourselves from the heat, O'Hara and I pried open the crumpled door and dragged the driver away from danger. As we made it back to the group, the blonde girl I recognized spoke up.
None of our phones are working. Is yours?
Several others had leaned over the driver. I pulled out my phone. I'd just been using it minutes before with the battery half full, but now it refused to turn on. No.
It doesn't matter.
Professor Grady checked the man's bloody neck.
He's dead.
But why are our phones all dead?
Scanning the area, it occurred to me that the only light was that of the growing curtain of fire. Limited to one end, the flames cast the rest of the lane in dancing pale blue, and there were no illuminated windows to be seen among our houses. You guys had lights on, right? Several heads nodded while their owners' eyes went searching. Their reaction told me I was right. There was a flash when I first came out here.
Perhaps an EMP.
Grady stood before pulling down on his brown jacket to adjust it. Still kneeled over the dead man, Uhara looked up.
I don't think this dude is really an ambulance driver.
Prompted to explain, he began searching through pockets.
There's nothing on him at all except the government card. And even that's just a photo and the number.
No name? Grady began looking at the wreckage again.
Well, if an electromagnetic device did go off, something more is going on. Why are the back doors of the ambulance open?
From where we stood, it looked like the doors had somehow crumpled outwards. Daring the heat, we could see strange liquids dripping from the ceiling within the devastated vehicle, and a complete lack of medical equipment. Rather, it looked like a prison car carrying the disguise of an ambulance. Open manacles lay on the floor within, glinting pale blue. It was unclear whether they had been recently used to chain someone. The olive-skinned guy was the first to say what we were all thinking.
Did someone climb out the back after it crashed?
If we can't call, we should go for help. I can't see any lights. Is the entire city dark?
At the edge of the group, a lanky, red-haired boy a little younger than us stood staring off into the darkness.
It's eerie out there. No way am I going.
Nobody leaves.
I turned to Grady because I guessed he wouldn't say something like that lightly. Why?
You all came out to the street from your individual houses, right?
Many glances were shared, and 8 heads nodded while he watched.
And none of you saw anyone unknown running from here?
None of us had.
Do any of you live together?
We looked at each other and shook our heads.
No roommates happen to be home right now? No friends over?
Nope.
No.
Me neither. These are all singles on this side of the buildings. It's like a split sort of thing.
Same over on ours.
And that's very unlucky,
Grady studied our faces.
because there are 9 of us and 8 houses. Someone doesn't belong.
It hit me as I stared at the burst-open doors. Someone here climbed out of that ambulance. Behind his glasses, Grady's expression was grim.
Yes.
Collectively, we took a stunned moment to realize how much trouble we were in. We began to discuss vague notions of having seen one another, and I tried to vouch for the girl whose name turned out to be Sarah, but it was clear that nobody on this street actually knew each other despite having lived together for half a school year. At the time of the incident, we had all been too busy on our computers or phones to have seen much. Worse, only Uhara had brought his wallet outside, and thus could show a driver's license confirming his identity.
What about you, Professor? We're all students. Why are you here?
This is my first semester teaching at this college. I'm in temporary housing until I find a long-term place.
That's very convenient.
Not for me.
Seeing the tension rising, I stepped forward. Come on, guys, no matter what happens, we can't turn on each other. If there is someone who doesn't belong, that's what they'd want, right? For us to fight?
Nobody here looks like a terrorist.
Beyond Sarah, Todd, the red-haired lanky guy, broke his silence.
It's so weird out there with all the lights off. Why would terrorists EMP our college?
I frowned. Come on, nobody's saying it's a terrorist.
Well, that may not have been the initial plan. He may have needed to do it as part of his escape.
I held my palms forward in an attempt to stop that line of thought. Again, no one said it was a terrorist.
Sarah did.
Uhara pointed at our only olive-skinned student.
It's obviously Keel, right? Sarah's not wrong that the rest of us don't look like terrorists.
Akil glowered.
Seriously? Do I even have to explain how asinine that is?
Hey, I call it like I see it.
Akil approached, a threatening expression on his face.
You want to compare numbers? There are more attacks from white guys than people that look like me. For all we know, Evan's the terrorist.
I took a step back. Hey, no.
Is that true? Are there more attacks by white people?
Rather than facing him down, Akil was suddenly side by side with Uhara.
Hey, I only know what I see on TV. I just happen to watch different channels than most.
I took another step back, suddenly apprehensive. I had nothing to do with those groups, but saying so would mean nothing. Beside me, Professor Grady held out a separating hand and grimaced.
Well, there's no TV or internet here, so let's just take stock of what we do know. The ambulance contained a fake driver, a container of some sort of volatile substance, a possibly related electromagnetic device that knocked out the power, and a prisoner that is now among us. You know what I notice? A distinct lack of said device. The technology that caused that green flash. It's nowhere to be found.
From his position behind everyone, Todd raised his hand.
Well, then that means the former prisoner still has it.
Yes.
Something about this seemed too rapid and volatile for my tastes. We're making an awful lot of assumptions here. Grady disagreed.
There are facts before us, Evan. We can't ignore them. Something is going on here, and we are likely in real and physical danger. Our only hope is to identify the stranger and restrain them until the power comes back on.
Cornered by what seemed like a very logical argument, I could only accept it and hope to keep the process civil. Should we tell our life stories or something? See if something doesn't add up? Uhara shrugged.
I'm a student. I'm from Brooklyn. What else do you want to know?
Does anyone have family nearby we can go to for help?
I would, but they're on vacation, and I'm not going out there.
Akil clenched a fist.
Life details are useless. Any youth recruited for a mission would be trained to tell a convincing story.
Uhara sneered.
You sound like you know what you're talking about.
It's a real thing in my country. You learn to avoid them.
Grady again rallied us.
Akil is correct that talking won't be enough. We need to find that device. Let's search each other.
Splitting into two groups, we began to search our opposite pairs. I awkwardly patted down Sarah before she did the same in return while sheepishly apologizing twice. None of our 9 appeared to have any sort of mysterious technological object on them. Todd stood apart, still staring off into the darkness beyond the houses where the pitch sky formed writhing silhouettes against nearby trees that were only dimly lit by the curtain of fire at the end of our street.
The escapee must have thrown it somewhere or lost it in the crash. We should go around to each house as a group to both look for the device and find our wallets.
As we agreed to this, the wall of fire completed a nearly imperceptible shift into pure white. With the blue tint gone, the neighborhood looked almost normal, and we moved as a suspicious group towards the first house. Glancing left and right, I watched for any out-of-place action. It appeared that there were 8 students and 1 professor, but how could any of us be a secret threat? Were terrorists recruiting college students now? I put a hand forward and stopped the tattooed and black-haired girl named Olivia from entering what she claimed to be her house. We can't see anything in there. No phones, no flashlights, no way to look around. That fire's the only light. Grady rapped his knuckle lightly on the frame of the door in frustration instead of going in.
Oh, you're not wrong. I can't see anything inside, but we have to try.
Olivia hesitantly led the way, and the 9 of us squeezed into her front room. From this angle, a very small amount of light cast by the fire was making it through the window, so only silhouettes were visible. I moved along the wall with my hand, feeling stacked records and books on shelves. Olivia rummaged along a couch in the dark.
It's around here somewhere. Wait, I think I found it.
A window shattered deeper in the house. A thud sounded, followed by a grunt. An impact shook the floor, and the others began shouting. Trying to discern what was happening, I moved my head back and forth, but all I could see were shadowy forms. My eyes played tricks on me, interpreting certain motions as horrific, misshapen limbs striking back and forth. I realized that someone was under attack. Everybody out! I didn't have to tell them twice. Practically stampeding back through the front door, they left me with a silhouette on the floor, and I dragged the unconscious person out to where 7 stood waiting. By flickering white, I saw it was one of the guys I'd hardly spoken to. His face had been smashed against the wall or the floor, or both, and I had no doubt. He's dead. The others stared back in shock. What had been mere conjecture had suddenly become brutally real. Could it be possible that there really was some sort of terrorist or criminal among us?
We can't search the houses.
Grady stared at the corpse.
In the dark, we're vulnerable.
Sarah shook her head after a grim calculation.
Our best bet is to get in touch with other people. We should just walk to the next street over and find someone.
Beside her, Todd shivered.
No, we can't.
Why not?
Todd backed away and held his arms close to his chest. Professor Grady snapped out of his daze.
Wait, that's a good idea. We'll all go to the next street over and we'll ask their superior numbers to isolate us. Without a doubt, one of us is now a murderer.
There wasn't much need for further discussion. Leaving the two bodies in the street, we, panicked 8, began threading our way between the houses. The issue of darkness again presented itself, and at the front of the line just behind Sarah, I halted, listening to the night. A strange sort of growling sound echoed around us, and then... Back! The growl became a violent cry and an unseen scuffle. Our screams echoed along the lane as we dashed into white illumination, minus one member. The meek brunette girl whose name I hadn't gotten.
Jesus Christ!
Uhara paced nervously.
No.
Grady stood silent and alarmed. Todd hugged himself tighter and seemed on the verge of crying. Olivia and Akil frantically compared details to try to make some sense of what had happened. Who has blood on them? Who has blood on them? But it was no use. Small spatters had found their way onto each of us. We paced and circled and argued in front of the wall of fire as it slowly grew yellow in tone. Whatever chemical or liquid was burning, it was now obvious that it was beginning to cool. Our only source of light was temporary. The darkness of the night seemed to be creeping closer, confining us to our ghastly yellow street with increasing pressure. I grasped desperately at some sort of epiphany. We've been attacked. We've actually been attacked. Someone used the cover of darkness to strike twice. Which means if we make any more mistakes, any at all, they'll be waiting to do it again.
Does anyone have any weapons? I'm the only one that we can be totally certain about. Give me a weapon, and I'll guard the rest of us, Brooklyn style.
That might be wise.
No. Weapons will just make this more complicated. What if the attacker makes a surprise move and gets a hold of it? We should all be unarmed.
Or maybe all of us should have a weapon. Make every move dangerous for the murderer.
It was too late to take it back. Once the suggestion had been made, every one of us grabbed a piece of metal or wood from the wreck in nearby yards. Holding them tight and glaring at each other, we formed a circle of tension ready to snap at the slightest misstep. This is exactly what I warned against. Turning on each other only helps the enemy.
Oh. Now you think there's an enemy?
I angled slightly to face Akil more directly. Yes, we've been attacked. I never said there wasn't a terrorist. I just wanted to wait until we knew more.
That's not what I remember.
Sarah lowered her long piece of metal and interjected.
No, he's right. There's no point in fighting. We're not the police. If one of you is an enemy, just go. It doesn't matter.
Looking around our circle, person by person, I waited for someone to make a move. I imagined everyone else was doing the same. After several moments spent at the edge of tension, I sighed. It's not going to work. The stranger won't reveal themselves on purpose. We're all poised to attack them the moment they do. Todd kept looking over his shoulder at the darkness outside of our slowly shrinking region of yellow light. Only the nearest 6 houses were still illuminated, and he was positively sweating from fear.
This standoff can't last forever. Sooner or later, that fire's gonna die, and then someone will make their move.
Glancing at Professor Grady, it occurred to me that he wasn't sweating. I could see glinting beads of yellow reflection on each of our foreheads. but not his. Was he just that calm under pressure? The tricks that my eyes had played upon me pushed to the forefront of my awareness, and my ears recalled the growling I'd heard. I breathed with wide-eyed realization. Holy God! It's not a terrorist! Everyone's eyes were on me. I took in the yellowed faces in our circle of suspicion. It's a creature. Did anyone else see that tentacle-like thing striking in Olivia's house? Nobody said a word. I pointed. You, Sarah, you saw it.
I don't know what I saw. I just think we should wait until someone comes or the phones start working again.
We may need to find that device and turn it off for that to happen. It may be sitting discarded somewhere nearby, continually pumping out electrical disruption.
You're awfully interested in that device, Professor Grady. I think we should focus on figuring out who the creature is.
What exactly are you getting at, Evan? There's no creature. As depressing as it is, human beings are capable of violence and murder the same as any imagined monster.
It's a shapeshifter. It has to be. Amorphous limbs and the ability to growl, changing only in the dark so as not to reveal itself? Come on, think about it. What's all that goo inside the ambulance? Grady's expression grew increasingly stern.
Don't foment panic, Evan. This is a factual situation with real strategy and real risk. There's no shape-shifting creature here, only a murderer. Look at the facts.
I am. I scanned the group for support. Some of them looked partially convinced. I have a set of facts, and I am being perfectly logical. The intruder among us has to be a shape-shifting creature. What's the goo in the ambulance?
Well, how are we supposed to know that without chemical analysis? It could be more of that incendiary liquid.
We stood in stressed silence and apprehension for a full 20 seconds as the fire beyond the ambulance descended smoothly into a deep orange shade that somehow made everything both lit and dark at the same time. Thus shadowed, Akil shivered.
I'm with Evan. It's not a terrorist.
That's just dumb. Let's stick to the real world.
I don't want it to be a creature. I'm sorry.
Visibly torn, Sarah finally chose a side.
I think it's a creature too. I did see something.
Sarah and Akil moved near me. Grady, Uhara, and Todd shifted to face us, weapons at the ready. Apart from both groups, Olivia chimed in.
Are we going to fight now? Is that it? You're all being ridiculous.
Uhara nodded promptly.
We'll fight if it comes to that.
Yeah, that's right.
I locked eyes with Grady, who relaxed his stance. I noticed he didn't throw down his weapon.
We should find that device. All 7 of us should go yard to yard. The murderer must have dropped it when the fire first flared up.
I glanced at my team. Agreed. But you don't touch it, since you've been all about finding it from the first moment. Grady's eyes narrowed in a subtle orange-shadowed glare. But he did not protest. In a loose knot, we moved down each sidewalk, yard to yard, peering at bushes and trees by flickering orange. I studied the movements of each of these supposed neighbors, trying to see something alien in their gait, in their unconscious mannerisms, and in their words. But they were all flawlessly human. I would almost have thought we were all who we said we were, if not for the fact that 2 of us had actually been attacked and killed. The only possibility was that there was really an infiltrator among us. Getting on her hands and knees to reach into a storm drain, Olivia crowed with triumph.
Yes!
She pulled a strange, spined metal hedron out from below. It was definitely technological, but with an aesthetic unlike anything I'd seen before. All 7 of us stared. As she lifted it high, the light of the fire shifted to dim blood red. Uhara pushed Olivia violently and without warning. Todd rushed in to back him up, and Grady accepted the handoff of the device before all 3 ran back towards the fire. Sarah, Akil, and I had managed a few surprised shoves, but our attention turned to Olivia, who lay bleeding from her head against the concrete shoulder of the street. She was unconscious, and it was unclear what we could do for her. As much as I wanted to keep the peace, vengeful anger overtook me, and I led the charge towards the blood-red flames. The shoving and bashing and stabbing happened in a whirlwind. Todd and Akil fell, too injured to do anything but groan. Sarah and I stood facing Grady and Uhara, each of us bloodied. "I know you're the creature, Grady." Uhara glanced once at Grady, but the professor just smiled by crimson light and pushed him back into the flames. With that shove, Uhara fell into the burning napalm-like ooze and died in seconds.
Ouch.
Grady turned his attention back to me.
Well, there's no creature, you fool, and no terrorist either. I just wanted this.
Grady held up the hedron.
We had no idea what its function was, but if it's the massive EMP device I think it is, after seeing it in action, it's going to be very useful.
Full of rage, I took a step, but he drew a gun from inside his brown coat.
Careful now, Evan.
Why didn't you just shoot us before? Why put us through all of this?
Grady smirked.
I'm a decent shot, but I was sure the 8 of you could still take me. It was far easier to present 2 sets of facts and let you divide yourself and destroy each other.
I didn't care anymore. I leapt forward and smashed down with my metal bar, not at Grady, but at the device. Several loud shots erupted and a spear of fire burned in my leg, but I brought the device crashing down to the pavement, where it broke into a dozen pieces.
You idiot! Do you know how much money you just destroyed?
Holding the gun to ward me off, Grady kneeled down and tried to gather the pieces with his hands, but it was no use. Sour, he sat abruptly down on the street, gun still halfway up.
Oh.
Bitterly, Grady resigned himself to his fate. The conflict was over, for the prize had been destroyed. Fatigued by the sudden release of tensions, we also sat. As the fire cooled into a small, smoldering aura of colorless light that barely contained us, I nursed my shot leg. The shadows in Olivia's house I'll chalk up to my imagination. But what was with the growling?
I assumed it was just an animal or something. But it wasn't me. I thought one of you did it out of paranoia.
A chill ran down my spine. So, you didn't attack us in the dark? Grady looked at Sarah and me with growing concern.
No.
He was growing more visible in my sight then, and I realized we'd made it to dawn. The glorious sun began to crest on the horizon, and we watched with relief. But only for a moment. It was not our imaginations, and it was not an after effect of the bright fire we'd been near all night. All the world brightened, and we saw the truth of our reality. It became very clear that all of us had been more than fools. Scattered about on the street, wounded, bloodied, and hopeless, we watched as strange, tentacled, and clawed beasts that had formerly been hidden in the darkness now circled our fragment of civilization. There was no city out there. The device had not been an EMP. No, it had been something else entirely. And it had taken the front half of our 8 houses and the majority of our stretch of road along for the ride. There might have been hope if we had done things differently. But we hadn't. We'd been so busy with suspicion, fear, greed, and hatred that we'd spent the entire night destroying ourselves rather than tackling the real problem. The fire was gone now, and so was our time. I clutched my weapon tight and steeled myself bitterly. For once, there was no argument. One fact above all cut through our biases, beliefs, and rivalries. The sun here was green.
Tales for Dark Nights.